have recently saw an article that mentioned an interview with Obama in 2022 when he said, in retrospect, he should have shined basically spotlight on the protests in 2009. And it's really interesting. This so-called reflection, delayed reflection, doesn't mean anything to people in Iran. And when you think about it, all these 47 years that regime has been killing people in Iran, all the politicians have done, especially the president and the prime ministers, that they have done reflection on what they have done. And this is only because they have a guilty conscience, or it's good for their popularity to so-called reflect on what they didn't do or what they did do. So if you think about it, in the 80s, if you go back in the 80s, bloody decades in Iran where thousands of people killed by the regime, thousands of people were arrested. No one said anything. Fair enough, someone might tell me, well, at the time there were no social media, no one reported to the government, so it's not their fault. They don't know. Fine. But even decades after that, when one of the main people who were massacring people in Iran in the 80s, Ebrahim Raisi, came to the UN, he was welcomed, he was given platform, he was not arrested. So they didn't do anything even then, after decades after the 80s. And then if you fast forward after basically the 80s, we have 2009, which I mentioned Obama, and then we have 2017, nationwide protests in Iran where hundreds of people were arrested, injured, tens of people killed. Then 2019, November 2019, where 1,500 were shot by IRGC, and then hundreds of them were arrested. And then in 2022, Women Life Freedom Movement, after the killing of Gina Mahsa Amini, at least 60,000 were arrested. Hundreds of people were killed by the regime. But yet still all this government kept the embassy of the regime open, and they didn't expel the diplomats of the regime. They didn't put IRGC on the list of terrorist organization. And then we're coming to now, 2026. As you know, since December 28, 2025, there were huge nationwide protests by people, and massacre happened, the bloodiest massacre you can imagine in the last 47 years in Iran. According to news, 20 to 30,000 people were killed by the IRGC. Tens of thousands were arrested. As I'm speaking with you, families are still looking for the body of their loved one among all these piled of dead bodies. All this is happening even now. The internet is shut. Anyone who say anything in Iran at this point, they be arrested. There are martial laws in many cities. People are still getting arrested, injured or left without any treatment. What do all these governments do around the world? They reflect. Remember, they reflect. This is really important. But we say in Iran, keep your reflection and your crocodile tears for yourself, because that means nothing to people in Iran. While this is happening, take an action, close the regime's embassy, expel the regime's diplomats, and put IRGC on the list of terrorist organization. That's what you can do, which they are not doing it for their own interests. So please keep your reflection to yourself, because you need to take an action. And that's why we do not rely on the government, of course, for the right reason, because we've been disappointed by them all the time. And we ask you as a responsible individual in the world to take an action and send a letter to your government and tell them to stop appeasing the Islamic regime, tell them to stop legitimizing the Islamic regime, and take an action now.